On we go. All right. We talked about this yesterday, and of course, that's reflection of Cuba. All right, moving right along. Factors of the war. So, why do we have this Spanish American War? And obviously, we should be pros at this by now. But what does that first quote mean? You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war. You could tie this into what event up in Boston in 17?
Boston Massacre.
Yeah, give me the controversy of the.
The British drawing and the American. Who started it? Or whoever was it?
Who started it? The British drawing. Okay. Drawing what?
Paul Revere's.
Paul Revere's painting, yes, which showed what?
The British soldiers attacking.
And what did the colonial. Okay, and what did the British viewpoint suggest or say or state?
That the colonists wanted to attack them with self-defense.
With the snowballs, the clubs, the eggshells. But none of that's in Paul Revere's. So what does that painting? What does that mean? You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war.
Someone takes pictures and they make a war of it.
How does it make a war out of it?
Like if
I don't disagree with you.
The colonists were attacking the troops, then they made a war of it because they were doing their self-defense. They're defending themselves. Increased tensions.
Increased tension. Go one step further, man, and I'll sell it. Say what you said again.
Like the colonists were attacking the troops. The troops just said that they fought because they were being attacked.
The only thing I would throw in there is when you said the colonists were attacking the British, or they were allegedly, or the British were allegedly attacking. The bottom line is it depends which picture you agree with and which one you think. Have you ever heard someone say it depends who you listen to? It depends which side you believe? Well, you furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war. Who is Hearst? Anybody catch that? It was mentioned in the American Vision book. What did he do by trade? You could probably figure it out by what else is up there. What was his occupation? What was his business? Say again? Well, he wouldn't say that. He's not going to call himself a yellow journalist. So he's a journalist. So what does he sell? Well, yes, stories. Where are they put? His job, his ideas, his life, blood is selling papers. And if you have up there, maybe the Maine blew up from an explosion. Who's going to buy it?
No.
You put in pictures that get people's attention. Have you ever heard pictures worth 1,000 words? He wants to sell his newspapers. You give him the pictures, you got the war. Could we say the same thing about the Boston Massacre?
Yes.
Do pictures influence people?
Yes.
Do they always show you what happened before and what happened after?
No. Makes it seem more real.
Have you ever had someone accuse you of something or look at something and you say, yeah, but all you saw was that? There was a lot before and a lot after. Calgo Madden gets into a fight with Mason, and she looks like the total aggressor, but they don't show him ruining her, let me think, what would upset my sister? Her curling iron. They don't show that before you took the keys to the truck, do they? Go ahead, hit the lights. All right, let's read. Lindsay, please. Well, we just heard from you. Sarah, go.
The yellow presses competed against each other to come up with more sensational stories and Hearst even sent against Frederick Remington to draw pictures of often fictional
Atrocities, but you get the idea. Go ahead.
I'm dyslexic. De Lome letter on February 9th, 1898, a letter written by Spanish minister to Washington De Lome that ridiculed President McKinley was published by Hearst.
And that was published in the newspaper. The Spanish criticism. Sensational stories. Boy, do we ever see that nowadays in journalism. All the time. The one thing that drives me nuts is when a news reporter says some people, or they say some Republicans or some Democrats, and I say, yeah, some. How many is that? 5, 10, all of them? Some Americans say, that drives me crazy. What'd you do? Take a poll? Oh, well, some people said, don't tell me you don't do it all the time. You go home to your parents. Well, they're doing it. Yeah, who's they? 5 of them? 10 of them? Oh, yeah, look at Shade. She's smiling. She knows what I'm talking about. Well, their parents are letting them do it. Uh-huh. Sure they are. Right.
God.
Are you a pro at sensationalism?
Oh yeah.
At least one of you admits it. Hey, I was your age. I get it. On we go. Madden, don't you ever swear again, but you can read this.
Remember the name to hell with Spain?
Oi.
That rhymed.
Like, what other war?
Okay, and that was the argument. Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. In other words, let's go to war against Spain. Keeping the Maine in mind. A boat and a note, just like what other war? Shade.
World War I.
Well, what's the boat?
Oh, the loose team.
And what's the note?
Zimmerman letter.
The Zimmerman letter asking who to attack us. Why is not everybody going to page 1 and writing this down? Come on, let's move. Once again, tell them. The Lusitania and Zimmerman note, Zimmerman telegram. Yes, named for Alfred Zimmerman of Germany, asking Mexico to attack us. Does anybody remember another boat we could say that led to the revolution?
Oh wow.
I was hoping at least one person would remember that. It starts with a G. The Gaspee. Thank you. The Gaspee. Write that down too, just like the Gaspee and the Revolution. Okay. Now, who was president when we're going to war? McKinley, yes. Okay, one very important part of McKinley's war message I want you to know is the Teller Amendment. The Teller Amendment, which proclaimed that when the U.S. had overthrown Spanish rule, it would give Cubans their freedom. And for the most part, that actually happened. Said, yep, we're going to war, but we're going to give Cuba their freedom. Except for 2, this was on the work you did over break, 2 what? 3-word answer. Starts with a B. 2, it's a geographic location. Three words, 3 letters. Starts with a B. Has to do with water. Thank you. Except for 2 bays. Anybody know the most famous one? Guantanamo. And yes, you can find that in your own writing there in the work you did. Okay, on we go. So here's what we're going to do. We say we will not colonize Cuba. Cuba's not becoming a state. That's what this Teller Amendment's all about. All right, read through it. Shade, go.
Teller Amendment, which proclaims that when the U.S. had overthrown Spanish rule, it would give the Cubans their freedom. When Spain is overthrown, U.S. would give Cuba their freedom. Cuba would not be a colony. Conditions: the U.S. forbade Cuba from making a treaty with other nations. If Cuba is threatened, U.S. would intervene.
So we're not coming in, but don't make any deals with anybody else. Now, does anybody know when this comes up again? In the 1950s, well, 1960s to be exact. Say again?
The Cold War.
During the Cold War, and what was going to happen there? What was the Soviet Union going to do? They were going to put nuclear weapons in Cuba, and the United States says, I don't think so. That was part of the Teller Amendment. And actually, President Kennedy mentioned the Teller Amendment when he said, they can't do that. Now, forget the fact that the United States government passed the Teller Amendment. It's not that Cuba agreed to it, not that the Soviet Union. We just said, no, our policy is you can't come in there. You didn't want nuclear weapons in Cuba. Okay, on we go. The Rough Riders, group we need to know. Who's the guy? Who's the president? Who's the man? Teddy Roosevelt, or Theodore, yes. Group of volunteers that played a huge role in the Spanish-American War were the Rough Riders, as they were called. Please tell me you have watched the movie Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
Do you remember Teddy Roosevelt? Bottom right over there. There we go. Yes. If you didn't watch it, Katie, you better watch it. You didn't say yes. Oh my That, you know what? We should have watched that on Christmas, that half day thing. Yeah. There's always next year. We'll watch it. I expect you to sign up and come in.
I will make sure. I'm the city council.
Do it. So what? You still get to watch a movie.
No, I know.
Read the screen, girl. You're hurting my feelings.
Also known as the Battle of San Juan Heights
San Juan Heights, yep.
was a
Decisive.
decisive battle of
She's reading the
the
screen.
Spanish-American War. The names San Juan Hill and Kettle Hill were names given by the Americans. This fight for the heights was the bloodiest and most famous battle of the war. It was also the location of the greatest victory for the Rough Riders, explained by the press and the new commander, the vice president and later president, who was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2001, overlooked then by American press. Much of the heaviest fighting was done by African American troops.
Okay, and that's one thing I definitely want you to be aware of, that last part there. Overlooked then by the American press, much of the heaviest fighting was done by African American troops. That is something that needs to be mentioned. Okay, can we interpret the picture? And before you do that, I want you to look closely.
Cuba. Cuba's kind of being traded off from Spain to America.
Not exactly, although I see why you would think that.
They look like they're chained. Oh, Steve.
Oh, the Cuba Cuba's like in the middle of it. In the middle.
You watch it from the start.
Are they
Oh, wait, she's
freeing
not
her?
on the star.
No.
Flag.
Not really.
She says her arm.
Don't forget the Spanish-American
It
War.
looks like she's breaking her chain.
Forget about that
Like
for a
she's
minute.
like settling a fight.
Now we're getting somewhere. Look at
Looks
how
like
you're not looking at how
she's
the men are
declaring-
dressed.
She's declaring.
Cuba
against
was
winner.
Is one of them a Confederate?
Now we're getting somewhere. Look at how the men are dressed.
Cuba was very fancy. Is that guy a Rough Rider?
No.
It's like the Spanish-American War would like
Cuba
set
was
Cuba
in the
free from Spain. Like that was what brought the North and South back together.
You know, John, you are 95% there.
middle.
You got the guy on the left. Who's the guy? Who is he? John just said it. What's he dressed like?
Confederate.
He's a Confederate. He's in gray. What's this guy dressed like? Not dressed like, he is. He's a Union soldier. When the war was over, North and South come back together, and what healed the country was that both the North and the South put their efforts into defeating Spain. So the interpretation of the picture is that the Spanish-American War actually healed the United States. We focused, we pulled together, and our focus was on defeating not each other, but Spain. That's the interpretation there. Those soldiers, that's actually a wax museum. Okay? Okay, moving right along then. Shade.
McKinley hoped to persuade Spain to grant independence to rebellious Cuba without conflict. When negotiations failed, he led the nation in the Spanish-American War of 1898. The U.S. victory was quick and decisive. Guam without a fight, Philippines without a fight, Cuba.
Okay, on we go then.
The past, present, and future walked into the bar. It was tense.
That's not.
Katie laughed. Just saying, Katie laughed.
Oh my God.
So did Grow, although she's trying not to.
Laugh.
Okay, the Philippine War. Philippine War. This is really a forgotten war in U.S. history. It's kind of like the Korean War, okay? But it's definitely part of imperialism. All right, John, back to you.
Americans did not like to think of themselves as imperial rulers, yet, like other imperial powers, the United States soon discovered, as it had discovered at home in its relations with the Indians, that subjugating another people required more than ideals and also required strength and brutality. That, at least, was the lesson of the American experience in the Philippines, where American forces soon became engaged in a long and bloody war with insurgent forces fighting for independence. The conflict in the Philippines is the least remembered of all American wars. It was also one of the longest, lasting from 1898 to 1902. One of the most vicious. It involved 200,000 American troops and resulted in 4,300 American deaths. nearly 10 times the number who had died in combat in the Spanish-American War. The number of Filipinos killed in conflict has long been a matter of dispute, but it seems likely that at least 50,000 natives and perhaps many more died.
Admiral Dewey, worthy of mention here. Admiral Dewey, he was early in the Spanish-American War. Commodore George Dewey managed to completely destroy the Spanish fleet in the Pacific at Manila Bay. Okay, and that's Philippines, remember, was Spanish territory named for, yes, King Philip. The Philippines were actually named by the first Spanish explorer who tried to circumnavigate the globe. Take notes the way I said that. Tried to circumnavigate the globe. He didn't make it. Anybody know who that was? Nobody knows. Going back to world history, U.S. history, tried to circumnavigate the globe. He died. He was actually killed in the Philippines after naming it in honor of King Philip. Katie,
Didn't he try to go through like the Panama Canal?
not the Panama Canal, but the Cape of Good Hope.
I'm thinking Marquez. I don't know why.
I keep saying Columbus.
Man to mention here, okay, we never heard of Ferdinand Magellan. Yes, you did. On we go, Emilio Equinaldo. John, please. No, I'm sorry, we're over to Lindsay. Go ahead. Equinaldo.
Equinaldo had a colorfully checkered career. Exiled from the Philippines by the Spanish in 1897, he brought back in 1898 to assist the American division. A year later, he led the Philippine insurrection against the new American rulers. Captured in 1901, he declared his loyalty to the United States. During World War II, he collaborated with Japanese when they occupied the Philippines. Oh, I still going.
Shade, please.
When I next realized that the Philippines had dropped into our laps, I confess I did not know what to do with them. And one night late, it came to me this way, that there was nothing left for us to do but to take them all, to educate the Filipinos, uplift and civilize and Christianize them. And by God's grace, do the very best we could by them, as our fellow men for whom Christ also died.
Now, obviously, you want to, first of all, think about what the words are, what he is saying, and then I'm going to ask you who actually said it. So think about the point, what they're making there, and what is basically the main purpose of this quote? To state what? Who wants to try? Lindsay?
I mean, it reminds me of the Anglo-Saxon, like the white man is superior to all other races.
Agreed, yeah. And definitely that is the influence behind this. Now, what's the purpose there? With that in mind, what are they doing?
They're going to take the territory of the Philippines.
Okay. Now, one last question then. Who do you think said it? McKinley. Very good. Very good. Okay. Finally, McKinley decided to keep the Philippines, even though they had been taken one day after the war, the end of the war. But he did so because popular public opinion meshed well with business interests, and the Philippines were a strategic advantage for American naval operations and defense of the Pacific. It's going to play a key role in World War II. Okay, so even though the war had actually ended, the United States decided to keep the Philippines, and we're going to keep it until the 1940s. Okay, but popular public opinion wanted it. It are good for our businesses, and it was their strategic naval advantage. Okay. Debate over the treaty in the Senate. The anti-imperialists versus the imperialists. Now, this was addressed a little bit on your American Vision book, but take a look at some of those names on the left side. And a lot of those you probably are familiar with. In fact, every one of them you should be familiar with. The anti-imperialists, the only one that might be a little bit of a gray area would be Sam Gompers, and he was a big unionist. They are against imperialism. So when you see anti-imperialism, they're against imperialism. Why? Well, take a look. They, especially the Philippines, deserve consent of the governed. What the heck does that mean? Consent of the governed. Good.
Like, consent to be governed by the government.
Yeah. But obviously the Philippines don't have any say here, do they? Despotism abroad begets despotism at home. What's despot? What does that mean? What's that referring to? Despotism.
Isn't it like hatred?
Well, it could lead to that, but a despot is a strong monarchy. Well, we got rid of that here. Why are we doing it there? And throws the U.S. into the Far East. Look at the imperialists. McKinley and Teddy Roosevelt were big imperialists. Why? Patriotism, glory, trade, white man's burden, and they felt we had no alternatives. And that's obviously a pretty quick rundown. But there's arguments on both sides, and that's what I want you to understand. Now, who are these imperialist leagues? And we're going to see this come up again in World War II when there are some that say we better not go to war. Okay, where are we at? John, I think we're back to you.
The American Anti-Imperialist League was an organization established in the United States on June 15, 1898 to battle the American annexation of the Philippines. The Anti-Imperialist League represented an older generation and were rooted in an earlier era. The anti-imperialists did not oppose suspension on commercial, constitutional, religious, or humanitarian grounds. Rather, they believed that annexation and administration of backward tropical areas would mean that abandonment of American ideals of self-government and isolation.
Don't forget, the more land you have, the more issues you might have too. Okay? What's going on here in this picture? And that is the Pope, by the way, at the bottom. What do you think's happening? Everyone try?
Is that like Britain trying to loan to the
Cuba.
or Spain? Or is it Spain? I think it's Spain. Spain's getting weaker, and eventually they'll have to let them
We'll have to let them go. Who's going to take them?
go. America.
The United States, yes. So yeah, the Queen is Spain. Can't hold Cuba and the Philippines anymore. What's going on here? And the quote, once again, is gee, but this is an awful stretch.
He's like covering
Is
Go
it,
ahead.
is it against, like, getting Hawaii and the Philippines because they're so far?
Okay, so why, yeah, and just say the last part again. Why are they saying it's an awful stretch?
That's so far.
And how far are we stretching?
Across the ocean.
And literally around the world. Okay, so the eagle is who? The United States. Yeah. What's going on here?
Father U.S. and his children.
Okay, I like that. Father U.S. Maybe Uncle Sam, you could throw that in there. And the children, which represent what?
All different countries.
All the different countries. Guam, Philippines, Cuba. Okay. How about what's going on here?
Well, that one's in Florida. So this is the States. Just adding some more clothes to his fit.
And who's adding the clothes? Who's that little guy there? Who's the tailor? That's McKinley. So you see what McKinley's doing, making the United States even bigger. Would that be pro-imperialism or anti-imperialism? Or do you think it could be pro?
I think
It could be pro.
You could interpret that either way, couldn't you? Now, if they're showing someone getting fat, it might be anti, right? How about what's happening here?
They're like saving the savage lands, I guess.
Up to
Or civilize them.
Look at civilization at the top. Now,
They're making them civilized.
real quick, who's carrying the baskets?
Uncle Sam.
And who's this? No, no, it's another country. There's only one that would fit. No. Spain's down.
Britain.
That's Britain, yes. Again, Anglo-Saxon. Okay? All right, more tomorrow. You want to be able to interpret these political cartoons, okay?
May I have your attention, please? Mr. Bowman's class report to Mr. Hoover in the gym.
No
Mr.
free
Bowman's
period.
Class report to Mr. Hoover in the gym.
So, Ben,
What?
what
Ms.
happened
Watson's class
last
report
night?
to the cafeteria. Ms. Watson's class report to the cafeteria.
I got all my errands done.